So if you guys remember previously, we studied and reflected upon the chapter Bab al-Nahi and al-Bid'ah wa Muhdathat al-Umur. The chapter regarding the ban on heresies and innovative matters in religion. So now he follows that, rahimahullah ta'ala, with the chapter in which he says he will establish a good sunnah or a bad sunnah. So how can the two chapters be reconciled? And what's the difference between a heresy, an innovation, and a good sunnah that somebody establishes a good sunnah? Y'all see that? It's like, how do we reconcile between those two things? How can you establish a good sunnah? This good sunnah should already be what? It should already be established, and you should just be following that. Y'all see that? So the word sunnah here, when he says, Babu fi man sanna sunnatan hasana, chapter regarding he will establish a good sunnah or a bad sunnah. The word sunnah here basically means a practice, whether completely religious, yani diniyan mahwa, like qiyam al-layl, right? That would be an example of a purely religious practice. Semi-religious, something that has elements which are religious and elements which are secular, like the humane treatment of animals and caring for the environment. That's something that's secular, but it also has what? Elements of the deen. The Prophet encouraged us when it came to animals to treat them what? Humanely. You guys remember the hadith about the woman who had a cat and she didn't take care of it, but she also wouldn't let it go out and do what cats do, find vermin and eat those vermin. Y'all see that? So ultimately the cat died and the Prophet said, دخل فيها النار, or دخلت فيها النار. She entered the hellfire because of that cat, because of her inhumane treatment of the cat. Y'all see that? So there are religious elements to that. And then you have practices which are secular or non-religious, like diet and exercise. Y'all see that? This is what is referred to or encompassed by what? The word sunnah in what? In this title. Man sanna fil islami, man sanna sunnatan hasana. Whoever established a good practice, as he says, right? A good practice. Now these sunan, which is the plural of sunnah, can be divided in three what? Three categories. The first category is sunnatun sayyah, a bad sunnah. A bad sunnah. Example, an innovative religious practice is considered sunnatun sayyah. And we learned this in the previous chapter, as the Prophet said in the hadith, kullu bid'atin dalala. Every innovation is misguidance, without acceptance, without exception. And he said in the other hadith, man ahdatha fi amrina hadha ma laysa minhu fahuwa rad. Whoever introduces into this religion of ours that which is not from it, it will be rejected. Y'all see that? So this is one form of sunnatun sayyah. And that's the one that the previous chapter was addressing. Another example of a sunnah sayyah is any act that the Islamic law disapproves. Anything that the Islamic law says is wrong, is illegal, is also an example of sunnatun sayyah, that people should what? They should avoid and not be the people who practice it or are the first ones to establish it. And this is supported by the hadith where the Prophet said, لا تقتل نفس ظلما إلا وكان لابن آدم الأول كفل من وزرها لأنه أول من سن القتل. Y'all see that? So when this hadith, the Prophet said, no person is killed unjustly, no murder is committed, except that Adam's son Qabil will share in the punishment for the crime because he was the first person to commit the crime of murder. Y'all see that? You saw last night on the 6 o'clock news, 3 people were killed in Newport News, waliyadu billah. You know who got a share of that sin? Those 3 murders? The son of Adam. Every murder that's committed from the time of Qabil until what? To the end of time, he'll get a share of the sin of that murder because he was the first one to do what? To commit murder. Y'all see that? So So this is an example too of what? Of establishing a bad practice. Y'all see that? So this is pretty clear. Now we go to the other side. كيف تسن سنة حسنة? How can a person establish a good sunnah? If it's a good sunnah, it has to be already what? Established, because the Prophet said, كل بدعة ضلالة. Every innovation is misguidance. And he said, if you do an innovation, it'll be what? Rejected. But a good sunnah, sunnatun hasana ya ikhwan, it only refers to legislative religious practices. Any hadith where you see that the Prophet said, "Man sanna fil Islami sunnatan hasana," whoever established a good sunnah in Islam, and he praises the person who does that. The Prophet is talking about a religious practice, something that's already established. You say, "Well, kayfa sannahu?" How did the person establish it then? If it already what? If it's already a legislative religious practice, it's because it refers to two types of things, right? It refers to two types of things. So the first, we said sunnatun sayyi'ah. That's what? The first category of sunnah, right? Sunnatun hasana is what? You divide the two categories, makes it what? A total of 3. 1, 2, 3. So these two under sunnah, as-sunnah al-hasana, they're legislative practices, but they can be divided in two types, where they can be looked at from two angles. Number one, a practice that is from the religion, but a particular person is the first one to perform it. يُبَادِرْ إِلَى فِعْلِهَا. He's the first one to what? To do it. That's an example of what? A person establishing a good sunnah, meaning being the first one to practice it, the first one to implement it. The hadith that we're going to just look at, we'll read through it and then maybe we'll comment on next week, we'll see, depending on the time. In that hadith, the Prophet ﷺ, he encouraged the people to do something. And there was a man from amongst the people who what? He hastened to do it. And the Prophet gave him credit. Other people followed suit afterwards. They followed suit. They did it too. But the Prophet gave him what? Gave him the credit. And referred to him as the one who sunnah hadi sunnah. He's the one who would establish the sunnah. And he got the reward of what? All those people who came after him. Y'all see that? But the second type of sunnah hasana is a practice that is from the religion, but it's been abandoned. It's been abandoned and people don't practice it. And either people don't practice it at all, or very few people practice it. It is seldom practiced. Y'all see that? And then somebody comes along, they revive it. They remind people about, hey, this is from the deen and we should be doing it. And we should be doing it this way. And people follow suit. And he'll get credit for what? For establishing or re-establishing that sunnah. Good example of that is, we talked about this previously, Umar al-Khattab, when he became the Khalifa, one night he went to the masjid with one of his companions, and that companion narrates the qissa. They went out in Ramadan and they went to the masjid. And when they went into the masjid, they saw different what? Different people praying Salat al-Tarawiyah, or praying at-Tahajjud, praying it, but praying it in separate what? Separate groups. So you might have 2 or 3 people praying over here together. One person praying over here by himself. Another person praying over here by himself. A group of 7 people praying in another part of the masjid by themselves. So all these different groups praying separately. So Umar said, man, this just doesn't look right. They should all pray behind one imam. So he appointed 2 of the companions who were well versed in the Quran to lead the people in prayer. So he came out the next night once he had re-established his sunnah, and he saw them praying. He saw them praying behind that one imam, all praying together, jama'atan. And he said, ni'mat al-bid'atu hadihi. He said, oh, what a good innovation this is. He didn't mean innovation, he meant what? Sunnah. He said, what a good sunnah that I have re-established. Y'all see that? So when the Nawawi says, Babu fi man sanna sunnatan hasana, the chapter regarding he who established a good sunnah, he means what? One of these two things. Y'all see that? Either he revived something that people stopped practicing, or there was something that was from the deen and people were told about it, and that person was the first one to do it, and other people followed his example, and so he got the reward for the people. And when he says sunnatun sayyi'ah, he means what? He means either an innovative practice or something that's what? That's haram. Y'all see that? Y'all see that? Like Mumtaz. All right. So the purpose of this chapter is to encourage us to be from the people who either revive the sunnah that's lost, and not to be shy. Well, nobody really does that. And I don't want to stick out like a sore thumb. No, if it's from the sunnah, do it. Even if people they don't do it. Or to be from the people who are the first to what? The imam comes, not me, just some guest imam comes and he reminds us of some sunnah. Right? He encourages, for example, to give. Give generously for a certain cause. Be what? Be the first one. Don't be the last one. Y'all say that? Be the first one. Because when you're the first one, everybody after you'll share what? You'll share in their reward. Y'all see that? But let's read the hadith that he gave. It's a lengthy hadith. We're just going to read it and just translate it, and then we'll maybe comment on it next week, inshallah ta'ala. So he says, Anabi Amr Jarir ibn Abdullah radiyallahu anhu. قال كنا في صدر النهار عند رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم. He said, we were sitting with the Prophet صلى الله عليه وسلم at what? In the early morning. فجاءه قوم وراة مجتابي النمار أو العباء متقلد السيوف عامته من مضر بل كله من مضر. So he says some people came while we were sitting with the Prophet, and they came and they stood at the back of the masjid. And he said most of them, no, all of them were from Mudar, which is a very it is a very well-established and well-respected tribe of the Arabs at that time, Mudar. He said these people came and they were wearing these clothes that looked like anybody who's been to a farmer's market and you go and you want to buy like a big bag of onions or a big bag of potatoes. It's in these burlap sacks. Y'all know what I'm talking about? You know what burlap sacks is like? And sometimes you even find like the basmati rice, the big bag of it, it's also in that burlap. Y'all see that? So he said basically they were wearing stuff like that. Sacks. But they had cut holes either for their legs, so they took the sack and they stepped inside of it and they tied it around their neck. Just imagine that. Imagine a big sack, you cut 2 holes at the bottom of it, you stick your legs through it, you pull it up, and then it has like some straps, or you cut strings and you do what? You tie it around your neck, and that's your clothes. Y'all see that? But at the same time, they're wearing these burlap sacks, or these just pieces of wool, these little pieces of wool just wrapped around themselves in whatever way they could wrap it around themselves. And they also had what? A siyuf. Means what? We're ready for anything. But what does that tell you right there? That just try to envision that. And then right there, when you see that vision of what they must have looked like. Urat, shibhi urat, they're almost naked. They don't have shoes on. They got these burlap sacks on them, and they got their sword strapped around themselves. You say to yourself, these people are rich. They're wealthy. They're well-to-do. What do you say? They're poor. They're dirt poor. They are dirt poor. Y'all see that? Tawhid. So then he says, فَتَمَعَّرَ وَجْهُ رَسُولِ اللَّهِ صَلَّى اللَّهِ عَلَيْهِ وَسَلَّمْ لَمَّا رَأَى بِهِمْ مِنَ الْفَاقَةِ. He said the Prophet's facial expression totally changed. He's sitting with his companions, maybe they're laughing and joking and just chopping up with each other, and then he sees these people come. Just imagine them come and into the masjid and stand at the back of the masjid, and the Prophet sees him, and his facial expression totally changes. Why does he change? Because he doesn't want poor people in his masjid. Is that why? Is that why his face changed? Because he doesn't want poor people in his masjid? Abadan. He felt bad for how poor they were, and not just that. Other people saw how poor they were, and they didn't do anything. They weren't intuitive. They didn't have the emotional intelligence to say people are poor. There are brothers and sisters in Islam. Let's do something about it. Y'all see that? So the Prophet was disappointed. I've been teaching these people all this time, and they don't know to just hop to it. You see somebody in need, you just what? You immediately respond to the need. You don't wait to be told. You see that? So he went to his home. And then he came back out. It says, فَدَخَلَ ثُمَّ خَرَجْ فَأَمَرَ بِلَالًا فَأَذَّنَ وَأَقَامَ. Man, come on, Abdullah. فَأَمَرَ بِلَالًا فَأَذَّنَ وَأَقَامَ فَصَلَّ ثُمَّ خَطَبَ. So he went into his home. He came back out. He told Bilal, make the adhan, we're going to offer salah. So Bilal, he made the adhan, they made the iqamah, they prayed, and then the Prophet ﷺ turned to the people and gave them an address. So basically, we're going to make prayer, we're going to call for prayer. Why? Because everybody is going to come. The masjid will be what? Full of everyone. It won't just be the few people who stayed behind for Fajr or who gathered in the masjid in the early morning before Dhuhr to just sit and talk with me. It'll be everybody in our community, or the vast majority of them, because the Prophet wanted to talk to everybody. And he recited, he said, Ya ayyuhan nasu ttaqu rabbakum alladhi khalaqakum min nafsin wahida. He recited the verse, the beginning of Surah An-Nisa. And he read it to the end of the first ayah. He also recited the ayah where he said, Inna Allah kana alaykum. I'm sorry. Then he also recited the ayah where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, Ya ayyuha alladhina amanu taqullaha wal tanzur nafsun ma qaddamat lighad. The ayah where Allah says, O mankind, O you who believe, fear Allah, and let each person look forward to what he is sent forth for what? For tomorrow, meaning the last day, the hereafter. Then he said, تصدق رجل من ديناره ومن درهمه ومن ثوبه ومن صاع بره ومن صاع تمره حتى قال ولو بشق تمرة. So the Prophet, then he started saying what? A man should give. He should give from his dollars, give from his cents, or give from his gold, give from his silver. A man should give from his clothes. You have extra clothes? Give from what? Give from those things. Min sa'a burrihi. He should give from what? From his wheat. Or min sa'i tamratin. He should give from what? His dates. If he has a date farm and he has extra dates, he should give from that. Then he said a person should give even if all he can give is what? A piece of a date. A piece of a date. Some people are poor themselves, but they have some dates and they say, you know what? I can break this in half and I can give it to somebody. The Prophet said what? Give. What's wrong with y'all? Give, give, give. So then it says that a man came from the Ansar. And he had what? He had a sack. And he was struggling to what? He was struggling to carry it because it was so full of what? Of wealth and commodities and things, or whatever he had collected. Says, he says, فَجَاءَ رَجُلٌ مِنْ الْأَنصَارِ بِسُرَّةٍ كَادَتْ كَفُّهُ تَعْجِزُ عَنْهَا بَلْ قَدْ عَجَزَتْ. Could barely carry it. In fact, he got to a point where he couldn't carry it, and somebody had to help him what? Carry it. And he did what? Poof. He laid it down right in front of those people, as if to say, this is a gift from me to you. Then it says, ثُمَّ تَتَابَعَ النَّاسُ حَتَّى رَأَيْتُ كَوْمَيْنِ مِنْ طَعَامٍ وَثِيَابٍ. He said, once the people saw what that man did, the light bulb went on. And they all went to their homes and they brought whatever they could until what? There were 2 piles of garments and gold and silver and food and other provisions that were stacked in front of those people that had been gifted to them from the companions of the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So then he says, حَتَّى رَأَيْتُ وَجْهُ رَسُولِ اللَّهِ يَتَهَلَّلْ كَأَنَّهُ مُذْهَبَةٌ. He said, then I saw the Prophet's face light up as if it was what? As if it was a plate of gold, right? From happiness. Because why? They got the message, they got the hint, and they took care of their brothers and sisters, and that made the Prophet very happy. And then he said, من سن في الإسلام سنة حسنة فله أجرها وأجر من عمل بها من بعده من غير أن ينقص ذلك من أجورهم شيء. ومن سن في الإسلام سنة سيئة كان عليه وزرها ووزر من عمل بها من بعده من غير أن ينقص ذلك من أوزارهم شيء. رواه مسلم. So he said, whoever establishes in Islam a good sunnah, and I'm going to test you guys after I say this, I'm going to see who's been paying attention. He said, whoever establishes in Islam a good sunnah, then he will get the reward for it. And the reward for everybody who follows after that. That one Ansar got the reward and got the reward for all the people who came after him without what? The reward of any one of them being decreased. Doesn't mean that you take somebody else's reward and they get nothing. But it means what? The reward gets doubled. They get what? The reward, but you also get what? The same reward in your account of deeds. And then he said, وَمَنْ سَنَّ فِي الْإِسْلَامِ سُنَّةً سَيِّئَةً. But on the other side of it, whoever establishes a bad sunnah, he'll get what? The sin for it. And the sin for everybody who what? Follows him in that. But that won't decrease the sin of either one of them in the least. Y'all see that? So now when the Prophet said here, this is the test and then we're going to break. When the Prophet said, "Man sanna fil Islami sunnatan hasana." First of all, we said that the sunnah al-hasana is two types. What are the two types? Ahsan. So any sunnah hasana is legislated. But those legislated sunnah are divided into two. What are they? What are the two? Revives. So he revives sunnah that what? Umitat. Yani ahya sunnatan umitat. He revived the sunnah that was what? That was abandoned. That's the first one. The second one was? He's the first one to do it. Ahsan. So which one is the Prophet talking about here? The second one. He was the first one to do it. Ahsan. Jazakallah khair. And so with that, brothers and sisters, there might be a few words that we might say about it next week, but I mean, generally, we get the point, right? We get the point of the hadith. There's maybe a few things. Inshallah, we'll expand on to next week. But is there any questions or comments that anyone wants to make before we do a little hospitality? Tafadhal, Shaykh.
I just want to ask, I lost my mom this morning in Africa.
Oh, yes, subhanallah. Inna lillahi wa inna ilayhi raji'un. What's your mom's name?
Aminata.
Amina. طيب. نسأل الله سبحانه وتعالى أن يغفر لها ويرحمها. نسأل الله أن يعفو عنها نسأل الله أن يعفوها ويعافي عنها. نسأل الله يرحمها ويدخلها الجنة ويغفر لها مغفرة عظيما. اللهم نقها من الذنوب والخطايا كما ينقى الثوب الأبيض من الدنس. اللهم اغسلها بالماء والثلج والبرد. اللهم أدخلها مدخلا واسعا. اللهم من فضلك وكرمك يا رب العالمين برحمتك يا أرحم الراحمين. اللهم ارزقها رزقا طيبا واسعا مباركا فيه. اللهم ارزقها زوجا خيرا من زوجه وأهلا خيرا من أهله ودارا خيرا من دارها. اللهم أدخلها الجنة وقيها عذاب القبر وعذاب النار. آمين آمين يا رب العالمين. وصلى الله وسلم وبارك على محمد وعلى آله وسلم.